I walked into Romano's with Sarah, adjusting my tie and scanning the elegantly decorated private dining room for our assigned table. 28 years old, and I still got nervous at family events. The soft lighting cast a warm glow over white tablecloths, adorned with fresh roses, and the gentle murmur of conversation filled the air. But as I approached the seating chart display, my stomach dropped. Every table had place cards with carefully written names in gold calligraphy. Every name except mine. Sarah squeezed my hand as Emma appeared beside us, laughing with a sound that felt like ice water. "Didn't think you'd actually show up," she said, her voice carrying across the room. Without another word, we quietly made our way to the bar. The bartender, a friendly man in his 50s with graying temples, poured us 2 glasses of wine, while I watched my family celebrate without us. The irony wasn't lost on me that I could see everything perfectly from our elevated perch at the marble bar, yet felt completely invisible. Extended relatives I hadn't seen in months filled the tables, their laughter creating a symphony of joy that somehow excluded us entirely. "Jay," I turned to find my cousin Marcus approaching with hesitant steps, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something that looked like guilt. Marcus worked as a paramedic and had always been straightforward with me, which made his nervous fidgeting even more concerning. "Marcus, good to see you," I said, standing to shake his hand. "Congratulations on the promotion to supervisor." He glanced around nervously before leaning closer. "Listen, we need to talk. There's something you should know about tonight." Sarah set down her wine glass, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "What's going on?" Marcus ran his hand through his dark hair, a habit he'd had since childhood when delivering bad news. "This wasn't an accident, Jay. The seating thing. Emma didn't forget to include you." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "Your parents have been telling everyone you've become different since your promotion at TechFlow Solutions. They're saying you think you're better than the rest of us now." The words hit like physical blows. "That's completely insane. I got promoted to senior developer 6 months ago. What does that have to do with anything?" Marcus looked around again, making sure we weren't overheard. "Your mom has been calling relatives for weeks, telling them you've developed anger issues and might cause a scene tonight. She told my mom you've been saying nasty things about Emma's engagement." Sarah's hand found mine under the bar. "That's ridiculous. Jay's been nothing but excited for Emma." "I know," Marcus said quickly. "That's why I had to come over here. None of it made sense to me, but your parents were so convincing. They said you refused to come to Uncle Robert's birthday party last month." My blood ran cold. I was never invited to Uncle Robert's party. And Aunt Carol's anniversary dinner 3 weeks ago. Never got an invitation. Marcus's face went pale. "Oh God, Jay. They've been telling everyone you've been skipping family events on purpose. Your mom said you told her family gatherings were beneath you now." I felt Sarah's grip tighten on my hand as the full scope of the manipulation became clear. Every family event I'd supposedly snubbed, every relative who'd grown distant, every cold shoulder I'd received, without understanding why. My own parents had been systematically poisoning my relationships with extended family members I'd grown up loving. "There's more." Marcus continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I overheard your mom talking to Mrs. Davidson earlier." Mrs. Davidson was David's mother, Emma's future mother-in-law. "She was explaining why you weren't sitting with the family tonight, telling her you had quote-unquote issues with authority and success had gone to your head." The elegant restaurant around us began to blur as the magnitude of betrayal sank in. These weren't random misunderstandings or miscommunications. This was a calculated campaign designed to isolate me from my own family. "Why?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Marcus hesitated before responding. "Honestly, I think your mom's jealous. When she talks about your promotion, there's this bitterness in her voice. She keeps mentioning how your dad never made that kind of money, how you've gotten too big for your britches. Sarah spoke up, her voice steady but cold. So they decided to destroy his family relationships instead of dealing with their own insecurities. It looks that way, Marcus admitted. And Jay, there's something else. Emma genuinely believes you called her engagement a mistake and said David was a loser. Your mom told her that last week. I stood up so quickly my bar stool nearly toppled over. I would never say that. I like David. He makes Emma happy. I believe you, Marcus said. But Emma doesn't know that. She thinks you've been talking trash about her relationship to other family members. As if summoned by our conversation, David himself approached the bar with a confused expression. At 32, Emma's fiancé possessed the kind of genuine warmth that had immediately endeared him to our family when they started dating 2 years ago. His approach now felt like a lifeline. Jay, Sarah, I'm so glad you made it tonight, David said, extending his hand. Though I have to admit I'm confused about the seating situation. Emma said there wasn't room at the family tables, but we have 2 empty chairs at the head table. Marcus and I exchanged glances. David clearly had no idea about the web of lies surrounding tonight's event. Emma told you there wasn't room? I asked carefully. Yeah, she seemed upset about it. Said something about you preferring to sit separately anyway. David's confusion was genuine. But that doesn't sound like you at all. You've always been so involved in family stuff when I've been around. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Even Emma had been fed lies about my preferences and behavior. My own sister believed I'd requested to sit apart from the family. Ovim. David. Sarah said gently, when was the last time you remember seeing Jay at a family event? David thought for a moment. Come to think of it, it's been months. Emma mentioned you'd been skipping things lately, said you were going through a phase. A phase, I repeated. Yeah, something about success changing people. I didn't really understand it because you seemed the same to me, but Emma was pretty convinced you'd become distant. Marcus cleared his throat. David, I think there are some things you should know about what's really been going on. As Marcus began explaining the situation to David, I watched the color drain from my future brother-in-law's face. The realization that he'd been fed a completely fabricated version of events was written clearly in his expression. This is insane, David said when Marcus finished. Why would they do this? Before anyone could answer, I noticed movement across the dining room. My mother Linda was making her way toward the ladies' room, her blue dress flowing behind her. Something about her confident stride, the satisfied smile playing at her lips, filled me with a rage I'd never experienced before. I need some air, I announced, but Sarah was already standing. No, she said firmly. I have a better idea. Sarah's expression had shifted into something I'd only seen once before during a confrontation with her manipulative ex-roommate last year. It was the look of someone who decided enough was enough. I'll be right back, she told me, kissing my cheek. Whatever you do, don't leave. I watched her follow the path my mother had taken toward the restrooms, but instead of entering the ladies' room, Sarah veered left into the private alcove, where Romanos kept their coat check and additional seating for overflow guests. The area was separated from the main dining room by frosted glass panels that provided privacy while allowing muffled sounds to carry. Marcus and David flanked me at the bar, both men clearly shaken by the revelations we'd just shared. David kept shaking his head in disbelief, occasionally glancing toward Emma's table, where she sat laughing with her bridesmaids. I can't believe this has been going on for months, David said. Emma's been so worried about your relationship, Jay. She kept saying she missed the closeness you two used to have. We never lost our closeness, I replied, frustration bleeding through my voice. At least I didn't think we had. I've been wondering why she stopped calling, why she seemed different when I'd see her. She thought you'd stopped caring about her life, David continued. Your mom convinced her you disapproved of our relationship. The bartender refilled our glasses without being asked, probably sensing the heavy conversation taking place. His discretion was professional and appreciated, though I wondered what he made of the family drama unfolding in his establishment. 15 minutes passed before I saw movement in the alcove. Sarah emerged with her phone in hand, her face flushed with what looked like a combination of anger and triumph. She walked straight to us with purposeful steps. "You're not going to believe what I just recorded," she announced, holding up her device. My heart started racing. "What do you mean recorded?" Sarah glanced around to make sure we weren't overheard, then pulled up her voice recording app. "I told your mother I was concerned about your behavior and asked for her advice on how to help you." "Sarah, you didn't!" Marcus breathed. "Oh, I absolutely did. And your mother, thinking I was on her side, told me everything." Sarah's eyes were bright with vindication. "She admitted to being jealous that you make more money than your father ever did. She said she's been protecting Emma from your toxic influence because you've gotten too big for your britches." David leaned forward. "She actually said that, word for word, but it gets worse." Sarah scrolled through her phone to find the beginning of the recording. "She told me she's been intercepting communications between you and Emma. That birthday card you sent Emma last month, your mother threw it away." The blood drained from my face. "What birthday card?" "Exactly. Emma never got it, so she thinks you forgot her birthday. And those phone calls from your grandmother that stopped suddenly 3 months ago. Your mom told her you said she was wasting your time with her stories about the past." Marcus slammed his hand down on the bar. "That's sick! Grandma Helen loves those conversations with Jay." "It gets even worse." Sarah continued, her voice dropping to an angry whisper. "She admitted to telling Emma that Jay called her engagement a mistake and said David was a loser. She also told me she's been planning tonight's seating arrangement for weeks, specifically to humiliate you." David's face had gone completely white. "Emma's been heartbroken thinking her brother hates me. And there's one more thing," Sarah said, her expression darkening further. "She told the restaurant staff that you were hosting tonight's dinner as a way to make up for your recent behavior. She literally set you up to get stuck with the bill." The elegant atmosphere of Romano's suddenly felt suffocating. The soft jazz playing in the background, the gentle clink of expensive glassware, the warm laughter from the family tables. It all felt like a cruel mockery of the psychological warfare being conducted against me. "How much could this dinner possibly cost?" I asked weakly. "For 35 people at Romano's," David calculated quickly. "With wine pairings and the special menu Emma selected, probably close to $3,000. $3,000. Nearly a month's rent. For a dinner I wasn't even properly invited to attend. "We have to do something with this recording," Marcus said. "This is beyond manipulation. This is emotional abuse." I looked around the restaurant, taking in the scene with new eyes. My father Roger sat at the head table, avoiding eye contact whenever he glanced in our direction. Emma laughed with her bridesmaids, completely unaware that her joy was built on a foundation of lies. Extended family members continued their conversations, probably discussing among themselves why I was sitting apart, why I'd become so antisocial, why I couldn't just be happy for my sister. "Play it," I said suddenly. "What?" Sarah looked surprised. "Play the recording. Let me hear exactly what she said." Sarah hesitated. "Jay, it's pretty devastating." "I need to hear it." She pressed play, and my mother's voice filled the space between us with crystal clarity. "I'm so glad someone else sees it, Sarah. Jay has completely changed since that promotion. He thinks he's better than all of us now. I've been protecting Emma from his toxic attitude because she doesn't deserve to have her happiness ruined by his jealousy." The voice continued, each word feeling like a physical blow. "He called her engagement a mistake, you know. Said David wasn't good enough for our family. Can you imagine, after everything we've done for him, this is how he repays us? Tonight's dinner is his chance to make amends, though I doubt he'll take it gracefully." Hearing my mother's voice so confident in her deception, so convinced of her own righteousness, broke something inside me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a series of unfortunate miscommunications. This was deliberate, calculated psychological manipulation designed to isolate me from everyone I cared about. "There's more," Sarah said softly, fast-forwarding through the recording. "Listen to this part." My mother's voice returned. "The truth is, I'm jealous. There, I said it. My son makes more money at 28 than his father ever dreamed of making, and instead of being proud, I resent him for it. He's gotten too successful, too confident, and it makes the rest of us look small. So yes, I've been cutting him down to size. Emma deserves a brother who knows his place, not one who thinks he's too good for family dinners." The recording continued with my mother admitting to intercepting my birthday card, lying to my grandmother, and orchestrating tonight's seating debacle. Each revelation was more damaging than the last, painting a picture of systematic emotional sabotage that had been going on for months. "She also said something about your father knowing but being too weak to stop her," Sarah added when the recording ended. I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what we'd just heard. My own mother had admitted to deliberately destroying my family relationships out of petty jealousy over my career success. She'd manipulated my sister's emotions, lied to my grandmother, and orchestrated tonight's humiliation as some sort of twisted punishment for achieving professional success. "What are you going to do?" David asked quietly. I looked across the dining room at the family celebration continuing without us. Emma was opening gifts from her bridesmaids, her face glowing with happiness that was built on lies about her own brother. My parents sat at the head table, probably congratulating themselves on successfully isolating me while maintaining their victim narrative. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth," I said, my voice steady for the first time all evening. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "How?" I pulled out my own phone and looked at the restaurant's setup. Romano's had speakers throughout the dining room for background music, controlled by a simple audio system near the hostess station. During the cocktail hour, I'd noticed staff connecting devices to address the room for announcements. "The same way she spread her lies," I said, "with an audience." Before I could execute any plan involving the restaurant's sound system, our worst fears materialized in the form of a well-dressed waiter approaching our section of the bar. He carried a black leather portfolio that could only contain one thing, and his professional smile couldn't hide the awkwardness of his mission. "Excuse me, sir." He addressed me directly. "I have your final bill for this evening's celebration." He placed the portfolio in front of me with the careful reverence reserved for delivering significant financial damage. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the leather cover to reveal an itemized receipt that made my vision blur. $2,915.37. The number seemed to grow larger the longer I stared at it. Wine pairings for 35 people. Premium cuts of beef. Appetizer selections that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Dessert courses I'd watched from afar. A celebration I'd been excluded from but expected to finance. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The waiter, whose name tag read Antonio, looked genuinely sympathetic. "I'm sorry, sir, but the lady in the blue dress specifically told our manager that you would be handling tonight's expenses. She mentioned it was your way of celebrating your sister's engagement after some recent family difficulties." Sarah leaned over to look at the bill, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. Marcus whistled low under his breath while David's face went completely pale. "Which lady in blue?" Sarah asked, though we all knew the answer. "The mother of the bride, I believe. Mrs. Garrett. She spoke with our manager about an hour ago to confirm the payment arrangements." My mother had actually told the restaurant staff that I was paying. She'd planned this moment, probably savoring the thought of my humiliation when the massive bill arrived. The ultimate punishment for daring to succeed beyond my father's achievements, for making her feel small by comparison. "Sir." Antonio was clearly growing uncomfortable with our prolonged silence. "Is there an issue with the arrangements?" That's when Sarah's voice cut through the elegant dining room with perfect clarity. "We're not on the guest list. Try the bride." Her words carried far enough to reach several nearby tables where conversations began to pause as diners turned toward the unfolding drama. The soft jazz continued playing, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Antonio looked confused. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mrs. Garrett was very specific about the payment arrangements." "Mrs. Garrett lied." Sarah said, her voice rising just enough to reach more tables. "We weren't even given seats at this dinner. Check your seating chart." The waiter glanced around nervously as more heads turned in our direction. The elegant murmur of dinner conversation was giving way to curious whispers as our exchange drew attention from across the private dining room. I watched Emma's table, where my sister had finally noticed the commotion. Her face was flushed with embarrassment as she realized the scene was centered around her brother, the same brother she'd deliberately excluded from proper seating. David stood up abruptly. "This is insane! Emma, what's going on?" His voice carried across the room, and suddenly the entire celebration was focused on our corner of the restaurant. 35 sets of eyes turned toward us as Emma rose from her chair, her face a mixture of confusion and mounting horror. "I don't understand," Emma called out, her voice shaking. "What's wrong?" Antonio, clearly wishing he'd called in sick tonight, looked between me and the increasingly curious dinner guests. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately with the manager." "No," I said, finding my voice. "Let's discuss this right here with everyone who's been told lies about me for months." My father, Roger, was now standing as well, his face ashen as he realized the situation was spiraling beyond their control. My mother remained seated, but her confident smile had disappeared completely. "Jay, please," Roger said, his voice carrying across the room. "Let's handle this privately." "Like you handled everything else privately." I responded loud enough for everyone to hear. "Like the birthday card you intercepted. Like the lies you told about me skipping family events I was never invited to." A collective gasp went up from several tables as extended family members began to realize they'd been manipulated. Grandmother Helen, sitting near the window, looked shocked and confused. Emma stepped away from her table and began walking toward us, David close behind her. "What birthday card? What lies? The one I sent last month that you never received," I called back. "The one your mother threw away so you'd think I forgot your birthday." The color drained completely from Emma's face. "That's not true." Sarah held up her phone. "Actually, we have your mother admitting to it on recording." The dining room fell completely silent, except for the jazz music still playing softly in the background. Even the restaurant staff had stopped their activities to watch the family drama unfold. My mother finally stood, her blue dress suddenly looking less elegant and more like a costume she'd worn to perform her deception. "This is ridiculous. Jay is clearly having some kind of breakdown." "Play it!" Marcus said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Play the recording." "Recording?" Emma looked between Sarah and my mother with growing alarm. "What recording?" Antonio, still holding the massive bill, looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Several other staff members had gathered near the kitchen door, watching the scene with professional concern. "Your mother told me everything," Sarah announced to the room. "She admitted to lying about Jay's behavior, intercepting his communications, and setting him up to pay for tonight's dinner as punishment for being successful." A chorus of shocked murmurs rose from the family tables as relatives began putting pieces together. Uncle Tom stood up from his table, his face dark with anger. "Linda, is this true?" "Of course not," my mother protested, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Sarah is obviously lying to protect Jay's reputation." "Then you won't mind if we play the recording for everyone to hear," I said, taking Sarah's phone from her hand. The restaurant manager, a distinguished man in his 50s, finally approached our group. "Perhaps we should move this discussion to a private area." "No," Emma said firmly, surprising everyone. "If there's something I need to know about my own family, I want to hear it now in front of everyone." She looked at my mother with a mixture of hurt and growing suspicion. Mom, did you throw away Jay's birthday card? Linda's pause was answer enough, but her eventual response was even more damning. I was protecting you from his negative influence. The admission sent a shockwave through the dining room. Emma's hand flew to her mouth as tears began forming in her eyes. And did you tell people Jay was skipping family events when he was never invited? David added his voice, cold with anger. Another pause, another damning silence. You did, Emma whispered, her voice breaking. Oh my God, Mom, what have you done? Antonio cleared his throat nervously. Regarding the bill, should I speak with the bride about payment arrangements? Absolutely not, David said immediately. Emma isn't paying for a dinner she didn't know was being charged to anyone in her family. He turned to address the room. I think it's time we all heard exactly what's been going on behind the scenes. I looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. The entire restaurant was watching us now, including diners from other sections who'd been drawn by the commotion. This wasn't how I'd imagined Emma's engagement dinner ending, but it was clearly how it needed to end. Sarah, I said, holding her phone toward the room. I think it's time everyone heard my mother's confession. I walked toward David, who was still standing near Emma's table, and addressed the room with a clarity I'd never felt before. Before anyone hears this recording, I want you all to know that I've spent months wondering why my own family seemed to be pulling away from me. I thought I was losing my mind. Emma was crying openly now, her makeup streaking down her cheeks as the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Jay, I'm so sorry. I believed everything she told me. You had no reason not to believe her, I said gently. She's our mother. I approached the small microphone setup that had been used earlier for toasts and speeches. Romano's had a simple sound system that connected to a central speaker network throughout the private dining room. During cocktail hour, I'd watched staff use it to make announcements about dinner service. David, may I borrow this for a moment? I asked, gesturing to the microphone. He nodded grimly. I think everyone needs to hear the truth. I connected Sarah's phone to the restaurant's audio system using the same cable that had been used for background music. The soft jazz faded away, replaced by the electronic hum of an active microphone. What you're about to hear, I announced to the room, is my mother's voice recorded less than an hour ago when she thought she was speaking privately to my girlfriend. I pressed play, and Linda's voice filled the elegant dining room with devastating clarity. I'm so glad someone else sees it, Sarah. Jay has completely changed since that promotion. He thinks he's better than all of us now. I've been protecting Emma from his toxic attitude because she doesn't deserve to have her happiness ruined by his jealousy. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps echoed from multiple tables as family members heard their own conversations with Linda referenced in her manipulative narrative. Grandmother Helen put her hand to her chest in shock, while Uncle Tom's face grew red with anger. But the recording continued. He called her engagement a mistake, you know. Said David wasn't good enough for our family. Can you imagine, after everything we've done for him, this is how he repays us? Emma let out a sob that cut through my mother's recorded voice. I believed her. Oh God, Jay, I actually believed you said those things. David's arm went around Emma's shoulders as the recording continued, each lie building upon the last in a carefully constructed narrative designed to isolate me from my own family. The truth is, I'm jealous. My mother's voice continued, and the dining room fell completely silent. There, I said it. My son makes more money at 28 than his father ever dreamed of making, and instead of being proud, I resent him for it. The confession hit the room like a physical blow. Several relatives stood up in shock, while others shook their heads in disbelief. The woman they'd trusted to provide accurate information about family dynamics had just admitted to deliberate manipulation motivated by petty jealousy. He's gotten too successful, too confident, and it makes the rest of us look small. So yes, I've been cutting him down to size. Emma deserves a brother who knows his place, not one who thinks he's too good for family dinners. My mother tried to grab for the phone, but Marcus stepped between us, his paramedic training evident in his protective stance. Let everyone hear what you really think of your own son." The recording continued with Linda admitting to intercepting my birthday card, telling my grandmother I'd said she was wasting my time, and orchestrating tonight's payment scheme as punishment for my success. I told the restaurant he was paying tonight as his way of making amends for his recent attitude problems. He deserves whatever he gets for thinking he's better than us. When the recording finally ended, the silence in Romano's private dining room was deafening. 35 people sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of Linda's manipulation sank in. Even the restaurant staff stood frozen, having witnessed a level of family betrayal that transcended anything they'd seen in their professional careers. Grandmother Helen was the first to speak, her voice trembling with emotion. "Linda, how could you? I stopped calling Jay because you told me he said I was bothering him with my stories." "And I've been cold to him for months," Uncle Tom added, standing up from his table. "You told me he'd become arrogant and dismissive of the family." Aunt Patricia rose as well, tears in her eyes. "You said he refused to come to my anniversary dinner because he thought our restaurant choice wasn't fancy enough." One by one, family members began sharing their experiences with Linda's lies, creating a chorus of betrayal that painted a clear picture of systematic manipulation. Each story was a small piece of the larger puzzle that had been designed to isolate me from everyone I cared about. Emma approached me with shaking hands, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "Jay, I'm so sorry. I believed every word she said. I thought you'd changed, thought you didn't care about me anymore." "I never stopped caring about you," I said, my own voice breaking. "I've been wondering for months why you seemed different, why you stopped calling." "She told me you said my engagement was a mistake," Emma whispered. "She said you called David a loser and thought I was settling." David's face was white with anger as he looked toward my parents' table. "Mrs. Garrett, I trusted you with information about our wedding plans, our future. You used that trust to manipulate your own daughter." Roger finally stood up, his face ashen and his hands shaking. "Linda, what have you done? This is our family." "Our family." Linda snapped, finally dropping her pretense of innocence. "Our family stopped including me the day Jay decided he was too good for us. I was protecting what was left." "You were destroying what was left," Grandmother Helen said with more strength than I had heard from her in years. "You turned us against each other with lies and manipulation." The restaurant manager approached cautiously, clearly wanting to resolve the payment issue without further escalating the family drama. "Regarding tonight's bill, we need to clarify the payment arrangements." Emma wiped her eyes and looked at the massive total in Antonio's hands. "How much is it?" $2,915, Antonio replied quietly. Emma turned to our parents with fury in her eyes. "You set up my brother to pay for a dinner you deliberately excluded him from." "It was supposed to teach him humility," Linda said defensively. "Success has made him forget where he comes from." "Success?" Emma's voice rose to near shouting levels. "He got promoted at work. That's something to celebrate, not punish." David stepped forward, his own anger barely controlled. "Mrs. Garrett, you've been lying to your daughter about her own brother for months. You've manipulated family relationships and orchestrated tonight's humiliation. And now you think Jay should pay for the privilege on..." The dining room buzzed with angry conversation as extended family members processed the full scope of Linda's deception. Several people were openly crying, while others looked ready to physically confront my mother. I said, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone still connected to the sound system. "It's time for some changes in this family." Emma stepped into the center of the dining room, her designer engagement dress still elegant, despite the tear stains and smeared makeup. When she spoke, her voice carried a strength I hadn't heard from her since we were children, standing up to playground bullies together. "Everyone please listen," she announced to the room. "I owe my brother a public apology." The conversations died down as Emma commanded the attention of our entire extended family. David stood beside her, his hand resting supportively on her shoulder. "Jay, I'm sorry I believed the lies about you. I'm sorry I excluded you from tonight's dinner, and I'm sorry I almost made the biggest mistake of my life." She turned to address the room. "Our parents convinced me to remove Jay from our wedding party. They said his attitude problems would ruin our special day." A collective gasp rose from several tables. Being removed from a wedding party was serious business in our family, a public declaration that relationships had broken down beyond repair. "But after tonight," Emma continued, her voice growing stronger, "I'm making some changes to our wedding plans." She looked directly at our parents. "Mom and Dad, you are no longer welcome to plan or organize any part of my wedding. David and I will be handling everything ourselves from now on." Linda stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "You can't be serious. We've already paid deposits, made arrangements." "What deposits?" David asked sharply. "Because according to our budget spreadsheets, we're still short on almost every major expense." The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Emma's face went through several expressions before settling on a look of horrified realization. "Mom, you said you'd already paid the florist deposit last month." Silence. "And the photographer retainer 3 weeks ago." More silence. "How much money were you supposed to contribute to our wedding fund?" David asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Emma pulled out her phone and began scrolling through banking information. "We set up a joint account for family contributions. Mom and Dad had access to make deposits and pay vendors directly." She looked up from her screen with the expression of pure shock. "There have been withdrawals almost every week for 6 months. Small amounts, usually $200 or $300, marked as wedding expenses." Uncle Tom, who worked as a branch manager at First National, stood up immediately. "Emma, can you check if there are receipts or vendor confirmations for those expenditures?" "That's what I'm looking for now." Emma set her fingers flying across her phone screen. "I see charges to restaurants, department stores, gas stations. Nothing related to wedding vendors." The implication was staggering. While Linda had been systematically destroying my relationship with the family, she'd also been stealing from Emma's wedding fund. David's voice was ice cold. "Mrs. Garrett, have you been stealing from our wedding account?" "It's not stealing when it's family money," Linda protested weakly. "It absolutely is stealing," Grandmother Helen declared with surprising firmness. "I gave you $3,000 specifically for Emma's wedding dress. Where is that money?" The number hit the room like a physical blow. $3,000 was a significant sum for our grandmother, representing months of her Social Security income. "And I gave you $1,500 for the rehearsal dinner venue." Uncle Tom added his banker's training, evident in his precise recall of financial details. "Do you have receipts for those expenditures?" Linda looked around the room, desperately searching for support that wasn't coming. Even Roger had stepped away from her, his face reflecting his own shock at the scope of her deception. "I was managing the money responsibly," she said weakly. "By spending it on yourself." Emma's voice cracked with emotion. "Mom, how much did you take?" The silence stretched painfully until David spoke up. "Based on what I'm seeing in Emma's account history, it looks like approximately $8,000 in unauthorized withdrawals over 6 months. $8,000. The number represented more than Emma and David's entire first year of marriage savings. Money that family members had contributed specifically for wedding expenses, stolen and spent on Linda's personal purchases. "I was going to pay it back," Linda said desperately. "With what money?" Roger asked quietly, speaking for the first time since the recording had played. "Linda, we don't have $8,000 to pay back." Grandmother Helen stood up with remarkable dignity for someone who'd just learned her granddaughter-in-law was a thief. "Emma, dear, I want you to call the police." "Grandma, we don't need to involve the police," Emma said quickly. "Yes, we do," Helen replied firmly. "What your mother has done is called embezzlement. She stole money that was given specifically for your wedding, and she's been lying about it for months." Uncle Tom nodded in agreement. "Helen's right. This isn't a family disagreement anymore. This is criminal behavior." David's parents, who had been sitting quietly through most of the evening's revelations, finally spoke up. Mrs. Davidson, a retired teacher with steel in her voice, addressed the room. "David, Emma, your father and I would like to cover the missing wedding expenses. No child should have their wedding ruined by this kind of betrayal." The generosity of the offer brought fresh tears to Emma's eyes, but she shook her head. "Mrs. Davidson, that's incredibly kind, but we can't accept that much money from you." "You're going to be our daughter-in-law," Mr. Davidson added gently. "Family helps family, especially when other family members have failed so spectacularly." The contrast was stark and painful. David's parents, who'd known Emma for less than 2 years, were offering to replace thousands of dollars stolen by her own mother. Marcus stepped forward from his position near the bar. "I think we should also discuss the recording Sarah made. What Mom admitted to doing goes beyond theft. She's been psychologically manipulating this family for months." "It's called emotional abuse," David said bluntly. "And it's exactly what she did to Jay." Emma turned to me with tears streaming down her face. "Jay, can you ever forgive me? I believed every lie she told me about you." "There's nothing to forgive," I said honestly. "She's our mother. You had every reason to trust her." "No," Emma said firmly. "I should have trusted my own brother. I should have asked you directly instead of believing second-hand reports about your behavior." She looked around the room at our extended family. "All of us should have asked Jay directly instead of accepting Mom's version of events." Uncle Tom stood up, his face grim with determination. "Linda, I want you to know that I'll be helping Emma file charges against you tomorrow. What you've done to this family is unforgivable. And I'll be providing security footage from tonight as evidence of your behavior," the restaurant manager added quietly. He'd been standing near the kitchen throughout the confrontation, clearly documenting everything for potential legal purposes. Linda looked around the room, finally realizing that her web of lies had completely collapsed. No one was coming to her defense. Even Roger stood apart from her, his own betrayal evident in his inability to meet her eyes. "I was trying to protect this family," she said one last time. "You were trying to control this family," Emma corrected her. "And you nearly destroyed it in the process." Emma turned to me with the expression of determination I remembered from our childhood. "Jay, I want to ask you something in front of everyone." "What is it?" "Will you be my man of honor at my wedding? Will you walk me down the aisle instead of Dad?" The request sent a shockwave through the room. In our family tradition, fathers always walked their daughters down the aisle. Asking me to take Roger's place was Emma's way of publicly declaring which parent had earned her trust and which had lost it completely. "Emma, are you sure?" I asked, overwhelmed by the gesture. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she replied. "You're the brother who sent me birthday cards that got thrown away. You're the brother who wanted to celebrate my engagement even after being deliberately excluded. You're the brother who deserves to give me away to the man I love." David stepped forward and extended his hand to me. "Jay, I'd be honored to have you as Emma's escort. And I want you to know that everything your mother told me about you was a lie. The brother Emma talks about when she thinks I'm not listening is the brother I see standing here tonight." I shook David's hand, feeling the weight of family trust being restored after months of artificial division. "There's one more thing," Emma announced to the room. "This is the last family event our parents will be invited to until they make full restitution for the money they stole and apologize to every person they lied to." The declaration was met with nods of approval from around the room. Our extended family had heard enough evidence to make their own judgments about Linda and Roger's behavior. As Emma spoke, I noticed Linda gathering her purse and coat from their table. She was preparing to leave, probably realizing that staying would only expose her to more confrontation. "Where are you going?" Roger asked her quietly. "Somewhere I'm wanted," she replied bitterly. "Since my own family has turned against me." "Your family didn't turn against you," Emma called out. "You turned against your family when you chose jealousy and manipulation over love and support." Linda paused at the dining room entrance, her blue dress no longer elegant, but somehow diminished by the evening's revelations. "You'll regret this, all of you." "The only thing I regret," Emma replied, "is not trusting my brother sooner." And with that, Linda left Romano's walking out on the family she'd spent months trying to control through lies and manipulation. The atmosphere in Romano's private dining room had shifted dramatically in the hour since Linda's departure. What began as a celebration built on lies had transformed into something more genuine, a family reunion between people who'd been kept apart by manipulation and deceit. Emma sat beside me at a hastily rearranged table, her engagement ring catching the light as she scrolled through banking records on her phone. David had pulled his chair close to ours, and the three of us worked together to untangle the financial damage Linda had caused. "Here's another withdrawal," Emma said, pointing to her screen. $250 3 weeks ago, marked as catering deposit. "Did you ever receive confirmation from a caterer about that deposit?" David asked. "No, and when I asked Mom about it, she said they were still finalizing details." Emma's voice carried a mixture of anger and sadness. I trusted her completely. Uncle Tom approached our table with a legal pad covered in careful notes. His banking background had kicked into overdrive as he helped us document the scope of Linda's theft. "Based on what we've found so far, the total is approaching $8,000, he reported. "But there might be more. Emma, do you have access to any other accounts your mother was involved with?" Emma looked up from her phone with a stricken expression. "The joint savings account Grandma Helen set up for wedding gifts. Mom has been managing deposits from relatives who wanted to contribute. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If Linda had been stealing from the main wedding fund, she might have been taking money from the gift account as well." Grandmother Helen, who had been sitting quietly with Aunt Patricia, spoke up with surprising strength. "Emma, dear, I think you should call the bank right now. Even though it's Saturday evening, they have 24-hour fraud prevention services." David handed Emma his phone. "Use mine. It might be faster." As Emma dialed the bank's emergency line, I found myself looking around the dining room at family members I hadn't spoken with properly in months. Each conversation Linda had poisoned, each relationship she'd damaged, was slowly being repaired through honest communication. Marcus joined our table, carrying a cup of coffee from the bar. "I keep thinking about all the times I defended your mom when other people questioned her stories about you." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Cousin Jennifer at the family barbecue in July. She said something seemed off about your mom's explanation for why you weren't there. I told her she was being paranoid." He shook his head ruefully. Jennifer was right. Mom's stories never quite added up, but she told them with such conviction that it was easier to believe her than question her. Emma finished her call to the bank and looked up with tears in her eyes. "The gift account is empty. Completely empty. There should have been over $3,000 from relatives' contributions over the past 4 months. The revelation sent another shockwave through our section of the restaurant. Linda hadn't just stolen from the main wedding fund, she'd taken every penny that loving family members had contributed as engagement gifts. "That's it," Uncle Tom declared, standing up with the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with financial crimes. "Emma, we're filing a police report tonight. This isn't family drama anymore, it's felony theft." David's father, who had been quietly observing from his table, approached us with a checkbook in hand. "Emma, David, I meant what I said earlier. Nancy and I want to replace every penny that was stolen from your wedding funds." "Mr. Davidson, we can't accept that much money from you," Emma protested. "You're not accepting it," Mrs. Davidson said, joining her husband. "We're investing it in our future daughter-in-law's happiness. That woman's theft doesn't get to ruin your wedding day." The generosity was overwhelming, especially in contrast to the betrayal we'd just experienced. David's parents, who'd known Emma for less than 2 years, were offering to replace more than $8,000 stolen by her own mother. "There's something else," David said quietly. "I've been thinking about the lies your mother told about Jay's attitude toward our relationship." He turned to address me directly. "She convinced Emma that you disapproved of me specifically, that you'd said I wasn't good enough for your sister. That's why Emma was so hurt and distant with you." "I never said anything like that," I replied. "I like you, David. You make Emma happy." "I know that now." But for months I've been wondering why Emma's brother seemed to dislike me so much. It was affecting our relationship because Emma felt caught between loyalty to her fiancé and loyalty to her family. Emma grabbed both our hands. She almost destroyed my relationship with both of you. Jay, I was starting to think you'd never accept David and David. I was beginning to believe my own brother thought I was making a mistake. The systematic nature of Linda's manipulation was becoming clearer with each revelation. She hadn't just lied about individual events, she'd created an entire false narrative designed to isolate me, while simultaneously undermining Emma's confidence in her own relationship choices. Emma, grandmother Helen, called from her table. Could you come here for a moment? Emma walked over to our grandmother, who was sitting with several other relatives who'd been quietly discussing the evening's events. When Emma returned, her face was flushed with a mixture of anger and vindication. Grandma just told me something incredible, Emma announced. Remember that family photo session we had planned for last month? The one I thought you skipped because you were too busy. I nodded, remembering the disappointment of missing what I thought was a last-minute family gathering. Mom told everyone you said family photos were a waste of time and you had better things to do. But Grandma just remembered that she never saw an invitation go out to you. Mom was supposed to call everyone, but she deliberately didn't call you. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Linda had been systematically excluding me from family events, while telling everyone I was choosing not to attend. The family photo session, Uncle Robert's birthday party, Aunt Carol's anniversary dinner, probably dozens of other gatherings I'd never even known about. How long has she been doing this? I asked, feeling the full weight of months of manipulation. I think it started right after your promotion, Emma said quietly. That's when she began making little comments about your attitude, suggesting you were getting too big for your britches. Marcus nodded in agreement. The timing makes sense. Your promotion was in January, and by March, your mom was telling people you'd become difficult to deal with. 6 months. Half a year of systematic lies designed to isolate me from my own family, while simultaneously positioning Linda as the reasonable parent trying to hold everyone together. The question now, Uncle Tom said, returning to our table with more legal paperwork, is what we're going to do about it. We're going to make sure she faces consequences, Emma said firmly. Real consequences, not just family disappointment. David's phone rang, and he stepped away to take the call. When he returned, his expression was grim. That was my mom calling from the parking lot. She just saw your parents getting into their car, and your dad was crying. The image was somehow more devastating than Linda's defiant departure. Roger's tears suggested he understood the magnitude of what had been lost tonight, even if Linda remained convinced of her own righteousness. He knew, I said quietly. In the recording, Mom said Dad was too weak to stop her. Which means he watched her destroy our family relationships and chose to stay quiet, rather than protect his own children, Emma added with bitter clarity. The realization that both our parents had failed us, one through active manipulation and the other through passive enablement, was almost too much to process. Emma, I said, are you sure about removing Dad from the wedding ceremony? He's still your father? Emma looked at me with the same determination she'd shown as a child when standing up to playground bullies. Jay, he watched Mom destroy your relationship with this family and said nothing. He watched her steal from my wedding fund and said nothing. He watched her lie to my fiancé about my own brother and said nothing. She paused, gathering her thoughts. A father's job is to protect his children, even when it means standing up to his wife. Dad chose to protect his marriage instead of protecting his family. David returned to his seat and put his arm around Emma's shoulders. Whatever you decide about the wedding, I support completely. This is your family, your choice. It's not just my choice anymore, Emma said, looking around the table. Jay, will you really walk me down the aisle? If that's what you want, I'd be honored. And will you be David's best man too? I want my brother standing up for both of us. The request was unprecedented in our family tradition, but then again tonight had already shattered most of our family traditions. The idea of serving as both Emma's escort and David's best man felt like a symbolic healing of the relationships Linda had tried to destroy. "I think that's perfect," David said, extending his hand to shake mine. "Brothers supporting each other." As we shook hands, I realized that the family I'd thought I was losing had actually been strengthened by tonight's revelations. The lies had been exposed, the manipulation had been stopped, and the people who truly cared about each other were still here, still willing to fight for genuine relationships. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Uncle Tom said, consulting his legal notes. "The police report. Are you prepared to follow through with criminal charges?" Emma looked around the table at the faces of people who'd supported her through the evening's revelations. "Yes. What Mom did was theft, and she needs to face real consequences." "And the family consequences?" I asked. "She's not welcome at my wedding," Emma said without hesitation. "She's not welcome at any family event until she makes full restitution and apologizes to every person she lied about." The declaration was met with nods of agreement from around our section of the restaurant. Our extended family had heard enough evidence to make their own judgments about Linda's behavior. As the evening wound down, I found myself feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: genuine optimism about my family relationships. The lies had been exposed, the truth had been revealed, and the people who mattered most were still here, still committed to each other. "Emma," I said as we prepared to leave Romano's, "thank you for believing the truth when you heard it." "Thank you for not giving up on me when I believed the lies," she replied, hugging me tightly. Tonight had been devastating and healing in equal measure, but it had also been the beginning of something new, something honest, something built on truth rather than manipulation. 3 months later, I stood in the bridal suite at Riverside Gardens, adjusting Emma's veil as autumn sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking the ceremony site. The venue was more beautiful than anything she'd originally planned, thanks to the generosity of David's parents and the united support of our extended family. "Are you nervous?" I asked, smoothing a wrinkle in her silk gown. Emma smiled at our reflection in the full-length mirror, her face radiant with genuine happiness. "Not about marrying David. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "I'm nervous about walking down the aisle without Dad, but I'm grateful you'll be there with me." The past 3 months had brought significant changes to our family dynamics. True to her word, Emma had filed criminal charges against Linda for theft and embezzlement. The police investigation had uncovered even more financial irregularities, bringing the total stolen amount to over $10,000 when interest and penalties were included. Linda and Roger were required to make full restitution as part of their plea agreement, though the money came from Roger's retirement savings, rather than any acknowledgement of wrongdoing from Linda herself. Even facing criminal charges, she maintained that her actions were justified attempts to manage family dysfunction. "Any word from them today?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Emma shook her head. "David's groomsmen are under strict instructions to escort them away if they show up uninvited. Security has their photos." The no-contact order was Emma's decision, supported unanimously by our extended family after months of attempted manipulation even during the legal proceedings. Linda had tried using Roger as an intermediary, sending messages about how Emma would regret excluding her parents from such an important day. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "The charges, the no-contact order, everything." Emma turned from the mirror to face me directly. "Jay, she stole from my wedding fund. She lied to my fiancé about my own brother. She manipulated family relationships for months out of petty jealousy. The only thing I regret is not seeing through her lies sooner." A soft knock on the door interrupted our conversation. "Come in," Emma called. Grandmother Helen entered the bridal suite wearing a navy dress with her late husband's watch pinned to her lapel. At 78, she moved more slowly than she used to, but her mind remained sharp and her moral compass unwavering. "Emma, dear, you look absolutely beautiful," Helen said, tears forming in her eyes. "Your grandfather would be so proud." "Thank you, Grandma, for everything, especially for supporting us through all of this." Helen's support had been crucial during the difficult months following Emma's engagement dinner. She'd been the one to insist on criminal charges when Emma wavered, the one to remind us that enabling bad behavior wasn't the same as showing family loyalty. "I brought something for you," Helen said, opening a small velvet box. "These were your grandfather's mother's pearls. I've been saving them for your wedding day." The pearl necklace was simple and elegant, exactly suited to Emma's taste. As I helped fasten it around her neck, I thought about family traditions and how they evolve when circumstances require it. "And for you, Jay." Helen continued handing me a small wrapped package. "Since you're serving as both escort and best man, I thought you should have something special too." I unwrapped the gift to reveal a pair of silver cufflinks that had belonged to my grandfather. "Grandma, I can't accept these." "Of course you can. You're the one walking Emma down the aisle today. You're the one who stood up for truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet. You've earned the right to wear your grandfather's cufflinks." As I fastened the cufflinks, I reflected on how different this wedding had become from what anyone originally planned. David's parents had taken over all financial responsibilities, Uncle Tom had replaced Roger as Emma's financial advisor, and various relatives had stepped up to fill roles traditionally handled by parents. "5 minutes," David's sister announced from the doorway. As Emma's maid of honor, she'd been coordinating timing and logistics all morning with military precision. Emma took a deep breath and looked at herself one final time in the mirror. "How do I look?" "Like the happiest bride I've ever seen," I answered, honestly. We made our way towards the ceremony site, where 120 guests were seated in rows of white chairs, facing a gazebo decorated with fall flowers. David waited at the altar with his father and his best friend from college, since I would be joining them after escorting Emma down the aisle. The string quartet began playing as Emma and I took our positions at the back of the ceremony space. I could see our extended family in the front rows, the same relatives who'd been manipulated and lied to for months, but who'd ultimately chosen truth over convenience. "Ready?" I asked, offering Emma my arm. "Ready," she replied, her voice steady and confident. We began our walk down the aisle as the music swelled around us. Emma's steps were sure and graceful, her face glowing with joy as she approached the man she'd chosen to spend her life with. David's expression when he saw her was worth every difficult conversation of the past 3 months. Halfway down the aisle, I caught sight of Marcus and his wife in the third row, both beaming with pride. Behind them sat Uncle Tom and Aunt Patricia, the relatives who'd apologized for believing Linda's lies and worked to make amends through actions rather than just words. When we reached the altar, I lifted Emma's veil and kissed her cheek before placing her hand in David's. "Take care of her," I whispered to my soon-to-be brother-in-law. "Always," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. I took my place as David's best man, standing beside the couple as they exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Emma's words spoke of choosing love over fear, truth over convenience, and family bonds that transcended genetic relationships. David's vows promised to support Emma's family relationships and honor the people who'd proven their loyalty through difficult circumstances. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the joy was infectious and genuine. This celebration was built on truth and supported by people who'd chosen to stand by each other when it mattered most. During the reception, I found myself reflecting on the lessons of the past few months. The experience had taught me that family loyalty isn't about blindly supporting blood relatives regardless of their behavior. True family consists of people who support your success, tell you the truth even when it's difficult, and stand by you during challenging times. As the evening progressed, several family members approached me to share their own experiences with Linda's manipulation. Each conversation reinforced my understanding that her campaign against me had been just one part of a larger pattern of controlling behavior that had affected multiple relationships within our extended family. Andrew. Jay? Emma said as we danced together during the brother-sister dance. I need to tell you something. What's that? I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself that night at Romano's. If you hadn't played that recording, I might have gone through my entire marriage believing lies about my own brother. I'm proud of you for listening to the truth when you heard it, I replied. That took real courage. The song ended, and David cut in to dance with his new wife, while I joined Sarah at our table. She'd been incredibly supportive throughout the legal proceedings, and family reconstruction, never once suggesting I should just forgive and forget for the sake of family peace. How are you feeling about everything? Sarah asked as we watched Emma and David dance. Relieved, I said honestly. For months I thought I was losing my mind. Tonight feels like validation that I wasn't crazy, that my perceptions were accurate. And your parents? I looked toward the venue entrance where security personnel remained stationed in case Linda and Roger attempted to crash the wedding. I feel sorry for Dad. I think he genuinely regrets his choices, but doesn't know how to fix them. As for Mom, I don't think she'll ever accept responsibility for what she did. Are you open to reconciliation eventually? The question was one I'd been considering for weeks. With Dad, maybe if he's willing to acknowledge what happened and make genuine amends. With Mom, I honestly don't know. The level of manipulation she engaged in wasn't impulsive or accidental. It was calculated and sustained over months. As the reception continued, I realized that the experience had fundamentally changed my understanding of family relationships. Blood relationships create opportunities for love and connection, but they don't guarantee them. True family is built through choices, actions, and consistent support, rather than genetic connections alone. Emma and David left for their honeymoon the following morning, but not before Emma pulled me aside for one final conversation. Jay, I want you to know that standing up for yourself that night saved more than just your reputation. It saved my marriage before it even began. What do you mean? David was starting to have doubts about our relationship because of the family dysfunction he was observing. He couldn't understand why my brother seemed to dislike him, why there was so much tension around family events. If we'd gotten married with all those lies still in place, the foundation would have been poisoned from the beginning. The insight was profound and sobering. Linda's manipulation hadn't just targeted me, it had threatened to undermine Emma's relationship with her future husband. Thank you for having the courage to expose the truth, Emma continued. And thank you for walking me down the aisle today. Having my brother give me away felt exactly right. 6 months later, Sarah and I announced our own engagement, and Emma insisted on hosting our engagement party at the same venue where her wedding reception had taken place. The guest list included all the same relatives who'd supported us through the difficult period following that night at Romano's. The experience had taught all of us valuable lessons about the difference between family loyalty and enabling dysfunction. We'd learned that protecting someone from the consequences of their actions isn't love. It's often the opposite of love. Uncle Tom, who'd been instrumental in helping Emma pursue legal action, offered a toast at our engagement party that captured the lessons we'd all learned. Family isn't about accepting bad behavior because people share your DNA. Family is about supporting each other's growth, celebrating each other's successes, and having the courage to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. As I looked around the room at relatives who'd chosen honesty over convenience, who'd been willing to change their opinions when presented with evidence, who'd supported Emma and me through a difficult period of reconstruction, I realized that our family had actually emerged stronger from Linda's attempts to divide us. The truth had indeed set us free, but it had required courage from multiple people to speak, hear it, and act on it. Emma's willingness to believe evidence over comfortable lies, David's commitment to honest relationships, and our extended family's choice to support truth over manipulation had all been necessary for healing to occur. Today, Emma and David are building their own family traditions based on honesty and mutual support. Our extended family continues to gather for holidays and celebrations, though the dynamics are healthier now that everyone understands the difference between family loyalty and enabling destructive behavior. Linda and Roger moved to a retirement community 2 hours away after completing their court-mandated restitution. Roger has sent a few letters attempting reconciliation, but he's never fully acknowledged his role in enabling Linda's manipulation. Linda has never contacted any of us directly, though mutual acquaintances occasionally report that she continues to portray herself as the victim of ungrateful children. The experience taught me that success doesn't require anyone's permission, that family relationships should support rather than undermine personal growth, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's destructive behavior. Most importantly, I learned that the truth, however painful initially, is always preferable to relationships built on lies. The night at Romano's was devastating, but it was also liberating. For the first time in months, I could trust my own perceptions and stop questioning my sanity. Emma's wedding day was beautiful, not because it followed traditional family scripts, but because it was built on authentic relationships between people who'd chosen to support each other through difficulty. That kind of family, the chosen kind, the kind built on truth and mutual respect, is worth fighting for. What about you? Have you ever found yourself questioning your own perceptions when family members told you different versions of reality? Have you had to choose between keeping peace and standing up for truth in your own relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult family situations. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not crazy for trusting their own experiences. Remember, the truth has a way of surfacing when people are brave enough to seek it. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is learning who truly has your back when everything falls apart.